Americans and people around the world have been baffled by how they got to a point where their two presidential nominees are Kamala Harris and Donald Trump. Many people look at this and say, is this really the best we can do? Well, what if I told you I have a candidate for you that'll make you want to campaign for either Kamala or Trump if they were running neck and neck against this person? Uh, yeah, enter Jill Stein, the Green Party nominee. And, you hear Green Party, you already kind of think if you were pro-human, you already have a automatic bad opinion about what's to come. There are certainly they want to, basically turn off the lights for all of us. They wouldn't put it that way, but they want to prevent us from using the energy that makes everything possible. But Jill Stein is much more than just an environmentalist, much more or much less, depending on how you look at it. She's also actually, you know what? I don't want to keep going. If anybody on the panel, welcome to the reality show. I'm joined by Michael, Jonathan, and Daniel. If any of you have anything to say, please go ahead now. Otherwise, we'll play a short clip of Jill Stein, which is short but long enough for us to pause a few times through.
Yeah, let's start with her. Let's introduce her to our worldwide influential audience.
Yeah.
Well, I just want to say one more thing because I think this happened a few weeks ago, a few months ago. It was either Razi or Mark who said on the show, "I hope none of the presidential candidates, meaning Democrats or Republicans, win." And my response was, "I really hope at least one of them wins because the alternative is terrible." And you'll see Jill Stein specifically today. Maybe we can do an episode about Chase Oliver because I believe third-party candidates are incredibly bad, especially in this election. Jill Stein has been for a while, but the Libertarians always manage to put really wrong choice. Should we start?
Roll it.
So just for some context, this was 1 month after October 7th.
I want to speak to the massacre now taking place before our eyes in Gaza. I speak as someone who deplores violence in all its forms and condemns violence against civilians of any nation. The war crimes being perpetrated by Netanyahu against Palestinians, however, are in a league of their own and have reached genocidal proportions, with Palestinians denied food, water, medicine, and electricity.
All right, that's a good place to stop. Yeah, denied food, water. Yeah, because when savages attack you, your immediate responsibility is to feed them and make sure, if they want to attack you at night, the lights are on so that they don't bump into any trees.
I mean, how is this not straight up evasion? Doesn't Rand talk about evasion as being the number one evil or up there? She's talking about violence. She deplores violence against citizens. What about the violence against the citizens of Israel that occurred 60 days prior? And what about the Palestinians dancing in the streets, celebrating and clubbing the bodies that are being dragged through the streets? I mean, Green Party, as you said, Razi, says it enough. And Dr. Peikoff has that wonderful line. He says that, I'm paraphrasing it, something to the effect of the environment is what the old hippies from the 70s had. They moved on to after they didn't have the Vietnam War to argue about anymore. And it's just a cesspool of Marxism, collectivism, environmentalism, anti-reason, pro-racism, and certainly anti-Israel. And you see it right from the get-go here.
Yeah, Michael, the genocide rhetoric started by some of the more openly anti-Israel people like Francesca Albanese and others days after October 7th. And Jill Stein, was clearly not one of the last to adopt it. Like this is early on in the war. She was already talking about genocide, not mentioning.
I think
Razi,
I think we have lost Razi, so
you'll probably cut off his electricity.
Yeah, I'll just quickly pick up from there. I mean, yeah, you have to realize when it comes to, I mean, this like this specific clip is just 1 month after October 7th. It took even like it took weeks even for the squad members to sort of just start talking about genocide, and it took even Democrats and well, specific Democrats, a few months in to sort of start, well, maybe we should have a ceasefire. But this candidate, Jill Stein, no, she was quick on it. She was calling it genocide before there was anyone almost else calling it. You have to remember when it came to the South African case at the ICJ that happened that started in January. So like three months in, yet Jill Stein was on top of it.
Yeah, I mean, I'll just say it frustrates me to no end that someone like this, and we've just gotten started here with this person's views, but you have a sense of what it is. It's they have a legitimate following in the U.S. I mean, this woman's gonna get, I don't know, Michael, what do you think? I don't know, a couple of percent.
Yeah.
And it's
She
us.
for example, in the last election, I think in one state she got like 100,000 votes. Like she is similar to the libertarian candidate. Basically, the votes that they are going to the two of them are sort of like basically almost like deciding an election because they're taking votes away. But they have following. Like I think she got 1% in the last election from the popular vote.
Well, and the fact that, let's just say, objectivism is seen as completely radical. I mean, how many Americans, I don't know, Michael, what do you think, would actually get behind a plan to phase out the entitlement state? Jill Stein is all about not just expanding the entitlement state, it's all an entitlement state. You have a right to a job, a house, everything else. But we're the radicals here. And this creature has a much bigger platform than we.
Well, yeah, I mean, one thing, and you've studied this a lot more than I have, Jonathan, and probably you, Daniel, too, is that she appeals to this altruism to start with, and this is at the basis of everything. The amazing thing is she wants to dole out everything and make sure we have complete collectivism based on no energy policy, because the energy that she's going to use to power this new society, this grand society, we've all seen these utopian societies, she's going to power it in a way that's completely green, using technology that doesn't currently exist but can't be fabricated because that too requires technology, and so on and so forth. When you hear somebody start off, I deplore violence in all its forms, you're in trouble. You know it, right? You don't even have to get past that first sentence. So unless the next statement is what Hamas did and what Gaza supported was completely inexcusable and they deserve everything they get, you're done. You are done with this woman. The problem I think that a lot of people have is that they get into discussions of the details that flow downstream from what is essentially a corrupt foundation. Her foundational belief is that what Hamas did was justified, despite the fact that she deplores violence of any kind. That raping young women is justified, that taking people hostages is justified, butchering babies, cutting off their heads, and so on. That's what needs to come back to her. Not get into what Israel is doing as a response, because there is no discussion of the response until we can clearly adjudicate the initiating act. Now, she'll go back and tell you that the poor Palestinians have been suppressed for the last X number of years. And then you have to say, but $30 billion or whatever the number is of aid has gone in there, and 29 billion of it went to build one of the best military tunnel systems in the world. I mean, we have to all stop with the yeah, but, and start to answer their question, because what they do is so beautiful. They start with a false preconception, and then they can build a house on top of it. But if you actually look at the foundations, they're rotten.
Yeah, and Michael, let me just expand on one of your earlier points, because when it comes to the US presidents, I think there's an important aspect of the way that the things are being done. Because, you might disagree with the policies of in this case, probably both candidates, but there are legal systems to do them. They have certain powers. They have legislature has certain powers they can go through. But this is from the real Green New Deal, which is something that the Green Party has subscribed to, and it has one of the sort of one of the points there is this: declare a climate emergency. The president should declare the climate crisis a national emergency, which gives the president powers under existing laws to take immediate steps to address the climate crisis without needing congressional legislation. So they are calling for basically using the powers of the president to basically do much more than I think should normally be allowed. That's when it becomes real dangerous, when not only there is like we should have a Green New Deal and legislatures should like approve it. No, it should just be done. It's such a crisis that we need to basically get rid of all the restraints and just go for it because it's a problem.
And I'm sorry to add real quick. And whatever China wants to do with regard to the environment, that's okay. Because that's part of their shtick. What 1.3 billion people want to do is perfectly fine, but we're going to suffer over here in America.
There's something about her too that's almost comfortably predictable. She's this kind of amalgamation. If you look up Jill Stein on the issues, it's the same old anti-America, America's to blame for everything, Israel's right behind, it was 10, 15, 20 years ago. I guess that's the thing I keep coming back to is, young people today looking for something radical, looking to make their mark. It's like objectivism it's not even still, it's even more now the radical voice on the landscape. I mean, there's no one talking about individualism. And the Greens want to declare a climate emergency. Isn't it safe to say that the Republicans now want to declare an immigrant emergency? I mean, they want to have some extraordinary powers. So it's like everyone has their cause that they're going to sacrifice the individual to. And only Ms. Rand, only objectivism kind of even has a moral perspective on what individualism is. To your point, Daniel, the libertarians are as shitty as they come. Again.
So Raz is now back. Do you want
Yeah,
anything to add, or should we continue with the video?
I don't know. First of all, I want to get to a few points because I don't know how if this hotspot will carry me to the end of the episode, and we know Jill Stein is supported by big Wi-Fi, so I'm not counting on.
Well, that's unfortunate.
Them emphasizing the need for a few super
Robert
chats.
Robert Naser says in the chat, bro, Jonathan Holding pulling the alpha. Anyway.
Yeah, Razi, just turn off your video. So all
Yeah.
bandwidth is used.
Well, we've just gotten started with Jill. Should we hear a little more from her?
Yeah, let's listen to a bit more. Although let me thank PC in the super chat. He says she is despicable. She absolutely is, but let's
We're
hear.
just getting started.
Yeah, so let's hear more from her.
Medicine and electricity while being relentlessly bombed as they're forced to flee their homes, running for their lives. President Biden and bipartisan leaders are not only complicit, they are full partners in Netanyahu's war crimes, supplying the bombs raining down on Gaza, the airplanes dropping them, the aircraft carriers defending the Israeli military, $10 million a day to strengthen the IDF, and propaganda to run political interference. The U.S. role in blocking a UN ceasefire resolution is absolutely unforgivable. We call for an investigation of the Netanyahu regime's war crimes, as well as the role of Biden and U.S. leaders in aiding and abetting them. And above all, these crimes must stop now. As a Jew who grew up.
So Razi said that he wants me to stop at this line, as a Jew, which we can talk about a little bit later if he comes back. But yeah, I mean,
can you say she's just like a carbon copy Medea Benjamin? She's just like a code pink It's just like nothing new. We have heard, and it's the same thing, just carbon copied. But there's an audience for this. There's really a voice for anti-Americanism, anti-Westernism, not to mention anti-progress. I mean, they're
Well,
not
it's
gonna,
anti-civilization. It's anti-civilization.
yeah, we're all in like kerosene burners and shivering in the cold. I mean, that's the end game.
Yep.
Is Anthem, if you've read Ayn Rand's Anthem.
Yeah, I mean, just going back, it's really, and I think it's important to remember. Again, this was 1 month after October 7th, when more than 1,000 Israelis have been slaughtered for just because they could, just because Hamas could breach the border and go kill some Israelis. That's why it happened. And calling for ceasefire, again, it's so easy to say, well, we just want peace. And you'll hear this from the hippies, or from the Greens, I mean. We just want peace, peace, and without realizing how much it emboldens terrorism. If Hamas knows, hey, we can just go there, kill some Jews, and some useful idiots in the West will argue for us to basically to there be no response to us. Again, there were still hostages. No hostages have been returned yet. More than I don't even remember how much it was originally. I think it was close to 200.
Yeah,
Hostages have been taken into Gaza, and none have been taken back, and she's already calling for a ceasefire. Mind you, American hostages too.
Yeah, and I'll just say, keep in mind, we always talk about the power of, influencing people, certainly at a young age. And, she was saying this, and then it wasn't too long after you had all the encampments on the best colleges all around America. These are people who are influenced by thinkers like Jill Stein. I mean, she is influential, even if she only gets a couple percent of the vote. I mean, Dr. Even Peikoff always talked about, everyone doesn't have to necessarily be an objectivist for a reason to rule the land. But she has tremendous momentum, and I think her perspective here influenced tens of thousands of, hippies of the left and right who went out and protested Israel for months.
Yeah, one other thing to add here. And this is the complete, one eye is completely blind. The poor Palestinians had to leave their homes to avoid the bombing. We don't talk about the fact that Israel dropped leaflets and told them to get the hell out of there because those places were going. But more importantly, the entire south of Israel had to evacuate because of the missiles that were coming in from Hamas onto south of Israel. And in fact, many of the northern communities had already started to evacuate because of Hezbollah backing up Hamas, or at least pretending to back up Hamas, etc. The fact that Israelis
are still evacuated. Like there are, like, I think 100,000 Israelis who basically, Razi likes to say, are refugees in their own country.
Correct.
Because
this is absolutely. I have a few living in our building in Tel Aviv. Absolutely. And a couple of them had lost, one case children, another case cousins. And they were really, when they first moved in, they were completely dazed. I mean, they seemed drunk. They were so traumatized. But the point is that this is the typical maneuver of these people. Just one other comment on her, because everything that comes out of her mouth is hypocrisy, everything. And the fact that she's a Jew, we'll get into that. But this is the Bernie Sanders baloney of, because I'm a Jew, I'm allowed to talk about exterminating Israel, which is essentially what Sanders would also like to do. But the other thing that she likes to do with her Green Party baloney is that more people actually die because of lack of energy than that are harmed in planetary problems. If you add up the number of people that are dead from either heat stroke or other heat-related illnesses and combine that with the all-evil air conditioning, because air conditioning is so bad and we shouldn't have it, great, that's more dead people. And people freeze to death when you don't have heat. So this whole thing, that her whole MO is to selectively take facts, don't connect anything to anything, and just talk about what a feeling good person she is and how we just have to go and be nice to each other.
There's a great book that everyone should check out called Return of the Primitive. And Miss Rand has a quote that I know Razi wanted us to mention, that the uncontested absurdities of today are the accepted slogans of tomorrow. And, you know, in the 70s, so much of this environmental, then called the ecology movement, Robert Nasser reminds us that, and Miss Rand talked about that, you know, that was seen as absurdities. But, you know, the professors taught it, the children learned it, and then people like Jill Stein are the product of years and years of poor education, unfortunately. So it's, you know, it's a great book to pick up, particularly on the environmental movement. Miss Rand nailed this decades ago. It's not pro-environment, it's anti-man. You know, their beautiful reality is a America, or is a Earth with no man on it. Zero carbon impact whatsoever.
We have a super chat from Roland. Thank you so much. He says internet money for Razi. Let's hope it reaches him. Thank you, Shosbot, for your super chat. He's asking, is she related to Ben Stein? I don't believe so. Yeah, just going back to this, as a Jew, and we've heard this from people like Norman Finkelstein. They very much like to emphasize this, you know, because I'm Jewish, because I'm of Jewish heritage, I somehow this is my opinion on this gains different significance. And I think this is something, I think Michael earlier mentioned altruism. I think that's fundamentally where it goes to. Basically, look, I'm Jewish, yet I'm arguing against Israel. Praise me. I'm going against my own self-interest, or you know, something similar. I'm actually I should be applauded for that.
Yeah, I mean, it reminds me of, I forgot who was the, I don't know, the woman who got canned or something, who was appalled that there's no Palestinian American news presenters. Because it's like what Rand talks about, a barnyard, you know, it's a racist barnyard look at people. Like, well, you're Jewish, of course you think this. You're Black, of course you think that. You're Palestinian, of course you think that. So it's just devoid for these people is the idea that, oh, maybe you can have your own mind, you're just a product of your race. And that's why, like, just discussion of these people is so ugly, because they quickly turn into what Rand talks about in Racism, her racism essay, just evaluating human beings like barnyard animals. Yuck.
Michael, anything to add, or should we go to watch the rest of the video?
I think for everyone on the call, and Jonathan put it so well. You know, there was a recent comment about I think Bill Maher made it, the absurd racism of the notion we should abolish tests because Black people don't do as well on them, which is an extremely racist comment. You never say Black people don't play football that well. And if you look at most American professional football teams, you'll notice that there is a majority of players that are Black because, frankly, they're better. But they're not better because they're Black. They're better because there just happen to be more Black athletes that are really good at football than white athletes. And if there's a really good white athlete, he'll play football too. That's okay. None of it matters. And it's the same thing with tests. You don't get rid of the objective assessment just because certain groups of people don't meet it that well. It would be like saying, we're going to hire you into football, even though you're inferior, because we don't have enough white people on the football team. So we're going to change the metric. We don't do that. And in fact, nobody wants to do that with a doctor or an engineer or a lawyer or anything. But somehow, in our amazing humanities, and I say that with all cynicism on purpose, because they have decided to get rid of any objective markers, we are allowed to change the rules. Same thing here. Hamas has no rules. The violence that was perpetrated makes no difference. They're allowed to do whatever they want for whatever reason. Only Israel is responsible, and we will taste the point of our assessment will be today, where Hamas is getting the crap beat out of it. Sorry to go on, but one last point. Let's be clear. We're over a year into this war. Hamas has been decimated, but there are still 50 plus hostages, or 100 plus, sorry, 50 live hostages estimated, 100 plus hostages still there. Hamas is not going to give up. Israel must continue this war until Hamas is obliterated and the hostages are returned, or Hamas surrenders and returns the hostages. It's that simple. Those are the only metric. Just because you're a loser doesn't mean we should give in to you. And that's exactly what Jill Stein is asking us to do. In almost every aspect of philosophy and life, she's asking for that.
Yeah, and I mean, it's also important to remember that people like her, people like Jill Stein, either calling for ceasefire or calling for embargo, weapons embargo on Israel, or calling for humanitarian aid for the Palestinians, are making this into perpetual conflict. I mean, again, just imagine if during World War II, we, for example, in Japan, Japanese people were actively starving because of the rate the war has been going, because everything was going towards the war machine, and they couldn't even feed their own population. That led to the end of the war. That made sure, that gave them a choice. You can either die for your cause, or you can finally surrender and stop, adhering to your emperor as like as a god, basically, because that was their view. And similar to the Palestinians, if you just supply them the whole time, Hamas and Palestinians, you can't just send aid specifically to the innocent people. You are actively supporting this war, and you are making it into perpetual conflict. You are making it into conflict that will never have a solution, because Hamas will not get destroyed, and it will keep going on.
Let's
Video?
see that clip.
Up just after the Holocaust with relatives who fled pogroms and a grandfather named Israel, I take never again seriously, and that means never again for anyone. For all those reasons, we demand a ceasefire, an end to the blockade, humanitarian and medical relief, release of hostages and political prisoners, and an end to occupation and apartheid. This is the only path to peace and security for us all.
People, planet, peace. Who can be against that? Come on, Michael. What are you, some kind of, I don't know, war hog? And Daniel, you just want war. Jill's for peace, planet, and what was the other one? People.
Security for everybody.
It's
everybody except the Israelis.
Yeah, I mean, like
again,
it's just
just going to like post, that is that phrase, history didn't start on October 7, and the people who say it don't actually taking seriously, because it's not like the violence from Hamas started on October 7. They were sending rockets, they were going to the border, they were attacking the border for decades since they took over. As soon as Israel disengaged from Gaza, and Hamas didn't win the election, but sort of won by the sword of the election and took over Gaza, they started attacking Israel. What would she say now? What would she say back then? And if I went back then, she would probably say, well, Israel is still, it's still here, so it's probably a problem. I mean, they have a right to resist. And something that she said that was very interesting, she called for releasement of political prisoners, which is hostages and political prisoners, which is a super interesting statement, because there are no political prisoners in Gaza. That no one is there because they like spoke out, or no Israelis are there because they spoke out against Hamas or something, and they were just taken as like a political prisoner. They are hostages who were taken on October 7, unless what she meant was call for the release of the Palestinian political prisoners held in Israel, which again, there are none. When people say Israel also is holding hostages, they are not hostages. They are prisoners who were caught on October 7th. And they are terrorists, literal terrorists. I mean, it's not like if you are a Gazan or a Palestinian, you just went on a walk and just suddenly you find yourself in Israeli border because you took a wrong turn. There is a wall. You can only get there if you know what you're doing. And many Palestinians did that. It wasn't just Hamas. Many Palestinians decided, hey, there is a hole in the wall. We are going in and we are going to kill Israelis.
Yeah.
Michael?
I mean, her whole point is, like I said, it's absurd. It also completely denies the nature of Hamas. So look, either you treat adults as adults and you listen to what they say, and if they ask for help, you think about, you consider whether to help them. But when an adult comes into you and walks into you and says, here's my declaration of me as a person, and that declaration includes that I'm going to annihilate you at the first chance I get, and you don't deserve to exist, and I do. Now, can you please help me? I mean, the moral equivalence, and I truly believe this was made. Obviously, Obama didn't start it, but this moral relativism crap that we are into now, where everybody's kind of the same, and nobody's perfect, therefore everybody's a little bit screwed up. And if you're a terrorist, it's because you're misunderstood, and if you're a successful country, it's because you oppressed others. Her positions completely deny the nature of what adults say. You can't have it both ways. Either you're a big brother society that doesn't care about what people do, in which case she'll get exactly what she wants, or you take people at their word and their actions. And the word and the actions of terrorists are to destroy. I ask people, what if Iran got in trouble and went away tomorrow? What would happen to the world? What would we miss tomorrow in the world if Iran and the Ayatollah disappeared? And I'm not saying we should go nuke them or anything, at least not yet, until they attack Israel again, and the answer is not much, because they haven't contributed anything positive to the world in a very long time.
Well,
and we need to get on that. Jonathan, I think you're on mute, but go ahead.
We can hear you, Jonathan.
Oh, yeah. I mean, look, she pulls the never again trope, to imply that Israel's response is the equivalent to the Nazi extermination of the Jews and the Holocaust. And I had if I must say so myself, a tweet go a little bit viral this week, not viral enough, but basically reminding people, if you are ignorant about the Holocaust, first thing, shut your fucking mouth. Number two, educate yourself. My mom was a docent at the Holocaust Museum in Skokie, Illinois. I've been to the Holocaust Museum in Washington, D.C. Everyone should visit it. You can learn a bit about the Holocaust. I mean, equating the Nazis in World War II with Israel's response to aggression, response to people storming through the border and butchering things. I was reminded, somebody re-upped some of the video of October 7th, where you see these girls in their 20s probably or 30s in party clothes running for their lives from men with massive weaponry who are hunting them down like animals. And for Jill Stein is just able to kind of not only evade that, but equate Israel's very moral response with the sickest of sick Nazi Holocaust.
Yeah, and never let people get away with saying something like, now more than 40,000 children and women were killed in Gaza in 1 year. How can this not be a genocide? Again, going back to the clip, that was 1 month after October 7th. That there was no 40,000. It was few thousands. It was already enough. That was too much, because it's not about numbers. It's about Israel just shouldn't defend itself. Israel, I don't like to use the word has a right to defend itself, because Israel has an obligation. It's not something Israel can choose if it wants to go get rid of the terrorists who try to genocide Israelis and did kill more than 1,000 Israelis. It's something Israel has to do. There is no option. There is no maybe we do it, maybe don't. Israel has an obligation towards its citizens. It's one of the few obligations that the government rightfully has to its citizens, and it's defending of their individual rights. Among them is right to life, and that is the most fundamental right that has to be protected. When Israel refunds on that, when Israel gives up on that, Israel loses legitimacy. This war is about the legitimacy of Israeli government, and it has to be waged. Hamas has to be destroyed. That's the only way where government fulfills its proper role.
And read, I think we'd all agree, read Ayn Rand's The Nature of Government, freely available after this broadcast. Go over and click it up to read, what is the purpose of government? Objectivists are not no government. I mean, Dr. Brooke has a great line where he says, it's escaping me now, but something effective, you want the right type of government, one that protects rights. And it's why I think it's part of our goal really to get people to pick up Ayn Rand, pick up an essay of Ayn Rand. In one of Jill Stein's videos, I happened to notice some books behind her, and I Googled, what are the books on Jill Stein's bookshelf? What has she read? This was one of the ones that came up, not surprisingly, anti-capitalist book. We are the product of these influences that we read, that we're taught in high school, that we're taught in college. So, it's why it's part of our goal, I think, to get people to pick up Ayn Rand, understand her perspective, and your life changes as a result.
Yeah, just to add on that, and Ayn Rand, I think Ayn Rand puts it really well and succinctly, but she didn't come up with these notions. I mean, the fundamental basis of Western civilization that sort of started with John Locke and his precursors and maybe culminated, I guess, with John Stuart Mill, if you read any of this, who wrote On Liberty. But that is the fundamental role, and Daniel said it, but I want to reiterate it. This statement that Israel has a right to defend itself is such an idiotic statement. It's like humans have a right to breathe. The fundamental primary purpose of the state is to defend its citizens. Now, there's a lot of other stuff they need to do, but just think, you don't have to be a philosopher to think about this. If the state exists and doesn't defend its citizens, what's the point? Why would you ever give up your rights to live in a state under laws if the state didn't give you something back? And that's the whole basis for Western government. That's it. Ayn Rand didn't think of that. This is the pinnacle of governments that have been invented or discovered by humans. And if anyone disagrees with that, you should go point out a better government system. I'm sure we'd all be very excited to look at it. But as we sit here right now, there is one form of government which seems to balance the need for protection and the rights of the individuals. And Ayn Rand puts it beautifully. Once Hamas invaded, and it wasn't just October 7th, it was all the missiles leading up to that. And folks, 30, 40 billion, I don't remember the number. I think it's $30 billion or $40 billion over the last 20 plus years since Israel left Gaza in 2006. We're spent on terror tunnels and munitions. She's talking about healthcare and schools. The only thing schools taught were how to kill Jews. The whole thing is, I've had this discussion with many people. I cannot think of a single good thing that Hamas has done. And if anyone can think of it, please let me know, because all they have done is created misery. It's a lot like what Stalin did in Russia. Millions of deaths for nothing.
I'll just say, Michael, playing devil's advocate, you probably get you're saying, isn't that the role of government? Something we see is pretty self-evident. But, my sense is that the libertarians would say, no, we need, everyone can have his or her private competing defense force, and there'll be a marketplace for defense. So, that's pretty mainstream libertarianism. They're against defense funding as well, just as much as Jill Stein is. I can't imagine a situation on which Jill Stein would be in favor of military response. She epitomizes, ironically, I guess, the turn the other cheek perspective. It's altruism, exactly as Ayn Rand defends it. Hey, missiles being shot at you, you're strong, you're wealthy. What have you got to complain about? These people are poor. No question about why they're poor, what has made them poor, the ideas that keep them poor. And Daniel, to your point, the altruist aid that keeps the war ongoing. If you want to end this, you want these people to see the real result of their ideas. And of course, when they found Sinwar, what did they find? All that UNRWA food, good, all the UNRWA donations. They go straight to the worst of the worst in all of these locations.
Yeah, and so just now expanded the topic a bit more. We should really also get to because someone was asking who is the person on the thumbnail, and we didn't talk about it yet, so we'll talk about it in just a second. But, when it comes to presidential candidates, it's always, remember, they have a vice president. So what is Jill Stein's vice president about? So
Right.
his name is Rudolf Ware, and he's a professor at the University of California. So he's running alongside Jill Stein. And what is he about? Well, he celebrated October 7th for one example. He has called that both parties are genocidal, and the only way to go is a third way. The only way to go is with the Green Party, and it's pretty rare when you look at the presidential candidate and like the vice president is like even worse, because usually the vice president is sort of like that calming. When Obama ran with Joe Biden, he was like, he's like I'm running with Joe. He's not crazy like I am. So it's sort of supposed to be this calming nature, and no, it's not the strategy Jill Stein picked. She picked someone who is even more ideological than she is. Anything you guys like to say about that before we go to the endorsement she got recently?
Well,
Yeah.
I mean, I'll just say, I went to Jill Stein's homepage, and I went to her page, kind of try to learn a bit about kind of what she's for. And Rand's article, Man's Rights, is also a must read. I think we'd agree. And you know, um, the whole idea that you have a right to all of these benefits, and Jill Stein talks about your right to a job, right to a home, and that is taken as a given, especially among young people. There's no sense of even the understanding of what a right is. And again, it reminded me of something from Miss Rand. This is from Virtue of Selfishness, Man's Rights, once again. And Rand talks about how in the 1960s the Democrats were running on this, a right to a useful and remunerative job, a right to adequate food and clothing, a right to adequate medical care. And all of that has basically been achieved. You've got Medicare now, you've got Fannie and Freddie, all these things to deliver all of the rights. So again, we downplay Jill Stein because we say, oh, she's a loon, she only got 3%. But this radical idea is, she's birthing new generations that 5, 10, or 15 years from now, it will not seem that radical at all.
Yeah, and so just to finish with her vice president, so on October 7th, or although in October rather, no, actually on October 7th, he posted a picture of Palestinians with a quote, "From the river to the sea, Palestine will be free." It's just a saying the Palestinian state should exist. I mean, he did post it on the day when the Hamas broke the border and went into Israel to kill Jews. Maybe it was a coincidence. Michael, what do you think?
Look, I think these people, the fact that any idiot can have a pulpit these days, and with social media and so on, I mean, we've talked about a number of these idiots on the show, is just a shame. The worst shame is that our young people don't think anymore and refuse to try to connect dots. They listen, and this isn't just a problem with these kinds of out in the middle of the world candidates. If you watch Wolf Blitzer, for example, and we haven't picked on him, and he's entertaining if you don't take him too seriously. But if you do take him seriously, you go out and commit suicide, because every time he does a show, the world is ending. It's just the end of everything. He's so depressing and so, oh, it's so awful and hyperbolized and so on and so forth. And none of it connects. You can't add A to B. So yeah, everybody deserves a great job. Okay, Jill, how are you going to turn on the electric lights to do that? What's that? How's that going to work in your philosophy? And these utopian visions, I mean, they've been tried. We've heard all about utopian visions. There were the small ones that always ended up to be a disaster, and the larger utopian visions, which ended up to be massacres, if you read history. But again, we're asking people to connect. What I think is missing, and until we straighten up our education system, and until parents start to hold our kids to actually saying, play that out for me. How does it work? Who funds all this? Who powers it? Who funds it? Who are the motors of the world? And how many motors are you going to have, and how many people are going to drop out or shrug until things collapse? But until we get our kids to think, we're going to be in trouble. don't accept the experts. What we have found, I would hope after COVID, after, the genius Blinken, who's been trying to get a damn treaty with Hamas and is shocked all the time that terrorists can't be reasoned with, and they keep killing each other and dying, and their leader's gone. And by the way, their leader had how many millions of dollars on him? Never mind the UNRWA connection and so on. People want to follow this stuff. Ask people to think. Until that happens, we are doomed to this stupidity, and every charlatan that has a pulpit will have followers.
Okay. I want to, if I can, Daniel, thank
Yeah.
Alex. Really generous contribution. And for those watching from around the world, we are the Ayn Rand Center UK, and we provide more content inspired by Miss Rand's philosophy than any other outwork in history. And we only do it with people like Alex. So please hit us up with £5, £10, £15. It really helps, keep us. We have 7 days worth of programming to you. I mean, this is something pretty incredible, and we can only do it because of your contributions. So please keep them coming. Alex says, Jill thinks that peace is manifested by osmosis. There's a saying in Arabic, you can't give what you don't possess. The moment the Arabs have peace with each other and themselves, we can talk about peace. And what about, I'll add to that, and thank you, what about peace with Israel? I mean, Israel is under attack all the time, and it's only because of the Iron Dome that we don't hear about it. We don't hear about dozens and dozens and hundreds of people being killed. And Michael, to your point, not because there's being leaflets dropped. Hezbollah doesn't drop little leaflets. Oh, move away from this area like Israel does. What irks me to no end is that too many young people have grown up with this belief that America is to blame. Israel is to blame. Modernity is to blame. Reason is to blame. And they have every bit of empathy for the worst, most mystical religious cults on earth. And that's why I think, books, if I can say so, like Miss Rand's A New Textbook of Americanism, which I was able to republish, are so important, because it doesn't work to be for America if you're for America for tradition, just because, America, I guess you need to understand what America is about, what reason is about, and that's why I recommend the book.
Yeah, I mean, just quickly on Alex's super chat, and thank you for that. Yeah, the only thing the Arabic countries are united in is hatred of Israel. As soon as the conversation is not about Israel, they are fighting each other. They've tried to make a federation between Egypt and Syria and fell apart because they hate each other. The Saudis hate the Iranians. The Saudis are fighting in Yemen. All of them are fighting in Syria. You have crazy stuff going on in Iraq. You have violence all over the place. This is not just, it's the West that's somehow imposing on it. Even if the West was not present at all, they would keep fighting each other, because that's the nature of dictatorships. They have to go outward. They have to fight against external threat. That's the only thing that keeps a dictatorship together, unless you have unless your base for a country is liberty, unless it's freedom, you will just fight against each other, because that's the only way this dictatorship can survive by. Jonathan, anything to add?
Capitalists want peace. Capitalists are the ones that understand and want peace in the best sense of the world. Like if you're a capitalist, you want to trade with other people, get everything that they're good at, give it. There's so many beautiful trading relationships, among Western countries. But how are you supposed to trade with countries that, Dana, to your point, are set up only to not only just threaten war, but to make it against you on a perpetual basis? How should you have to live with that?
Yeah, I mean, people try to make a claim that, the Western nations, they are trying to exploit the countries of the third world. They are, just trying to destabilize them so we can extract resources. And if you try to really look into it, it's the absolute opposite. The countries that the actual like big companies want to invest in are either Western or are stable countries that they know, okay, we can invest money in this country, and some crazy dictator will not take it over or nationalize it the next day over. The freedom and the sort of Western style of governments is something capitalism wants, because it ensures stability, it ensures property rights, it makes sure that we are allowed to prosper, and not, just someone deciding, well, I want to take it over by force, and suddenly he's allowed to because he's living in a dictatorship. Okay, let's actually go to something we probably should have started with, since it's on the thumbnail. Jill Stein has received an endorsement. Who has she received endorsement from? David Duke. For people who don't know, he's a former, I think they call them Grand Wizards of the KKK. He is a former leader of the KKK. And while I'm not sure how much relevant either him or KKK itself is, I believe it only currently now has maybe hundreds to thousands of members. But I think it's very revealing when I think this endorsement is very revealing, and it shows something that I'm worried about when it comes to sort of going into the future. So in the past, David Duke has endorsed Donald Trump in both 2016 and 2020, but now he decided against that. Why has he decided against that? So let me just read the statement he had. Although Dr. Stein and I obviously have our differences on important issues, she's the only candidate who speaks clearly against the war in the Middle East and Ukraine. By opposing Jewish supremacy in Israel and Jewish mass murder in Israel and the policies of the American government in these insane wars and the Ukrainian war there, she's actually doing something which is harming this Jewish power. So this is really great statement to get, especially since Jill Stein has actually been on Piers Morgan when she spoke against Kamala Harris, because Kamala Harris was endorsed by Dick Cheney, and she was talking about how, oh, look what this says about Kamala Harris, that Dick Cheney, the warmonger, the war criminal, endorsed her. And now she got the endorsement from her own Dick Cheney. She got the endorsement from David Duke. Jonathan?
Yeah, it reminds me of kind of what Miss Rand talked about with Israel, decades and decades ago. I mean, savages versus a modern rights-respecting country. And, Michael, you I think wisely kind of point out, what is Hamas, what is the Palestinians, what have they produced? And I look at the other side and I think, well, what has Israel produced? I am an investor, this isn't a recommendation, but an index of Israeli stocks is up some almost 50% in the last year. And these are companies like Teva Pharmaceuticals, Checkpoint Software, Wix Software. It's like Israel is a place that makes shit that helps us all so dramatically. If you've ever used Waze on your phone, to help find someplace, I mean, Israel comes up with these amazing technological advances that, improve the entire world. Probably even, within these hotbeds of areas that hate Israel with a passion. So, celebrate the modern, rights-respecting country, the only one in the Middle East, and that's Israel.
Yeah, it's a bit. If you ever visit Tel Aviv, and if those of you here, maybe you want to wait until the current situation calms down a bit. But I mean, I'm going back in a week and a half, but I live there half the time. You just look at Tel Aviv. I mean, it is a glowing modern city with skyscrapers and offices and big legal firms and big tech firms and all kinds of stuff. It's remarkable. And I'm happy to have the argument with anyone who thinks differently. If everyone left Israel alone tomorrow, Israel would leave everybody else alone. I mean, Israel has no interest. Really, they have much better things to do. It is one of the most joie de vivre, love of life group of people in the world. I think they're all, I joke around with my wife, they're all like a bunch of children when it comes to jumping up and down and enjoying life. Part of that's because I think when you have to run under missile shelters every now and then, you really appreciate what you have. But go there yourself and see if I'm making this up. It's a very simple country in that regard. They just want to be left alone to do stuff. And it's a little bit, America, I think, would be mostly happy. I mean, military is a big business for us. We would be mostly happy to be left alone to do stuff. And if China and Russia weren't trying to take over the world, and North Korea wasn't so proud of showing everybody they built another ICBM that they can float another, nuclear missile at people, we would be much happier. It's not the reality of the world. Jill Stein lives in a lot of effed up places. She lives in a lot of la land that doesn't exist on Earth. And it doesn't exist all the way from her climate policy, all the way up to this notion that the Palestinians are good people and the Hamas is actually a misunderstood organization. That's a big problem, people like that. The reason that the few Arab countries have already done deals with Israel, and why you can fly from Israel to Bahrain and to the United Arab Republic, and they do, Arab Emirates, sorry, United Arab Emirates, and we do, is because these Arab countries decided it was better to do stuff like called capitalism with Israel. And that's the way the world could be. That's not something you're going to hear from an Obama because it's way too realistic. You'll certainly never hear it out of Kamala because she doesn't know what she's talking about. And Donald Trump wouldn't say something that happy because then there's no enemy really to fight with, per se. But we can have a decent world if we understand that you leave me alone, I leave you alone, but if you mess with me, I will crush you. And that was our response finally after World War II, which was the last war that America really won. We woke up finally. We got a lot of kids dead, 50,000 if I maybe more in WW2, and we finally crushed our enemies.
Yeah, and
Also, quickly just mention if I could, Dana, my own experience. Michael mentions, visiting Tel Aviv. I've been to Israel 3 times. I've also been to Morocco, and this was more than 10 years ago. Went to Morocco with my family's idea, but we were told, oh no, you can't go without a guide. You can't just go out on, and Morocco is relatively liberal as I understand it, but it was like, oh no, you can't just walk out by yourself. Like anyone can walk out, I believe, in Tel Aviv, in Israel, and be completely safe. Doesn't matter what color, religion, ethnicity, that respects life. But the idea that as an American, let alone a Jewish American, you could walk around without some kind of a guide. Where in the Middle East would you really be safe? I don't know.
Yeah, and I think that's a really important point because, I love visiting different cities and I love going alone. And what I love to do is just, get out of my hotel, pick a direction and just walk. And whatever I see, no preparation, whatever I see, that's what I'll see. And I've done this with many European cities, with few. It's hard to do in America because you walk and you don't actually see anything for hours. But it's much easier to do in European cities. As you said, Jonathan, that's something you simply are not able to do in many of these Middle Eastern nations because you won't be safe, because these are not nations that have any respect or very little respect for individual rights, and you simply won't get that sort of thing, which again is such an achievement. The fact that Israel, which I don't think has barely any natural resources, has any real sort of like, it's not like an oil-based country as it with many of these as many of these Middle Eastern nations, and even that is taken from the West. Israel has become successful because of technology, because of modern capitalism, and I think that really shows the difference. Let me quickly thank Leon for welcome to membership, to YouTube membership. You'll be able to use it in just about an hour. We'll be releasing another video, another Leonard Peak of answers. Today, it's going to be a question from Michael Leibowitz on flag burning and birthright citizenship. If you are an ARCUK website member, you'll also be able to see that. You'll receive an email. So let's wrap it up. Jonathan, any last thoughts? And also, where can people find you?
Thanks for all of our contributors, all of our viewers. I mean, you help make us a real force for improving people's lives, which is, certainly been my experience with objectivism. And check out a new textbook of Americanism. It's all about elections now. If you're interested in who's going to be president of America, you should probably know a bit about what Americanism is about. Miss Rand understood it. She started this project in the 40s. We finished it some 70 years later. So it's available at Amazon. A new textbook of Americanism. Definitely check it out, and thanks for your support.
Jonathan and I didn't rehearse this, but it's one of the best books. It's succinct, to the point. It's extremely relevant. And my last parting gift to everybody, or suggestion to everybody, is don't accept the experts. Please go think for yourself. Read about some of this stuff. Most experts like to make things 10 times more complicated. It's good for them because then everyone assumes that they're the only ones who know and will leave it up to them. This is not true. Most things in life are a lot less complicated. The essence of them is a lot less complicated than what our so-called experts like to make it out to be. Good and evil is not that complicated, for example. There's a lot of nuances coming up, but the Middle Eastern problem is not that complicated. It really isn't. There's good and there's evil. The good is not perfect and the evil is not always evil. Michael Kaufman, 2Fs, LinkedIn. Kaufman with 2Fs, LinkedIn.
And there has been a conversation about chat about the ARCUK founding. So just one part of it, if you look in the chat and if you see someone has a green nickname, that's our funding. We are funded by our great supporters, and they keep us going. We still have one more thing coming up in, I think it might have already happened, on the Briefly Objective new video with James Valliant on what keeps hostages in Gaza. So link is in the chat. Make sure to check that out. You can find me on my YouTube channel, Damn Dan. Links to all of our stuff is going to be in the description. Until tomorrow with another episode of the Daily Objective, where it's going to be Razi and Alex talking about the Tamimi family. Until then, bye-bye.
Bye-bye.